I'm Donald Moffat.
And I'm Heather Menzies. Logan's Run will not be on tonight.
But stay tuned for the Charlie Brown special and the Fat Albert Halloween special.
And we'll be back next Monday night.
Houston, make sure you subscribe to the Word Balloon podcast, become a legal Word Balloon listener at patreon.com/wordballoon. I just going to tell you a copy.
His paintings redefined comic book heroes. His vision inspired a generation. The Legend of Kingdom Come is the definitive documentary on Alex Ross, known as the Norman Rockwell of comics.
It almost looked like Renaissance paintings, except for superheroes.
He makes them look like Olympian gods.
We go behind the scenes of his definitive graphic novel, Kingdom Come, now on Blu-ray, packed with exclusive interviews and unseen artwork. Order today at legendofkingdomcome.com.
If you're here at Word Balloon, it's because you like comics, creators, conversation, pop culture subjects. Would you consider joining the League of Word Balloon listeners? Patreon.com/wordballoon. For just $3 a month or more, you'll get exclusive access to the Word Balloon e-magazine, featuring transcriptions of some of my best conversations. When you subscribe, you'll also be part of the Word Balloon Book Club, where Brian Michael Bendis and I will pick a comic every month to review and discuss live with the League on this show. Join the League today, patreon.com/wordballoon. Thank you always for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners. Welcome back, everybody. Time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. I'm glad we're doing a live show. I know I've been doing a lot of pre-records lately, and I'll explain in a minute. But first, I want to welcome from IDW, the editor of the Godzilla books, many Godzilla books on the stands right now, and they're stretching the old rubber monster in many different directions. But here's editor Jake Williams. Jake, welcome to Word Balloon.
Hey, how's it going, John? Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm a longtime fan, as I've told you many, many times. I got to give my spiel again. This is the final time you'll hear it now that it's live, John. But for everyone, I met John for the first time. It was probably like the second convention I'd ever been to. It was ALA in Chicago, which is the American Library Association, and I was an assistant editor at the time. And it was one of the best weekends of my life. And I was flown out to Chicago. I'm from Illinois, but I was flown out to Chicago. And it was like the first night after the con. And first of all, like ALA is fantastic. It's all these librarians that come up to you, and they're not looking for exclusive covers. They're not looking for, just to get something signed and get it CGC graded and resell it. They want to hear about the stories. So like all day, every day for like this 3-day con, people are coming up to you. These librarians are coming up, and they're asking these real in-depth questions about the books, and they're listening to your pitch, and it's awesome. It's the best experience. And then after that, me and legendary comic book editor Mark Doyle, he was a Batman editor for a long time. He was my boss when I started at IDW. We went out to eat with Stephen Graham Jones and Van Jensen and a couple other people. So it was already really fun for me. You're meeting all these people, seeing all these creators for the first time. And then we go back to the hotel bar that night. And I've been drinking a little bit. I was starting to feel it a little bit. And I'm walking to the bathroom, and I see in front of me someone who I have listened to for years and years at that point. I see John Suntress walking down the hotel hallway, and I truly fangirled like I saw a Beatle. I mean, I could tell John, even in that moment, was kind of like, "Whoa, dude, it's nice to meet you." But honestly, it was so great. You really returned my energy. You were excited to see a fan. I was excited to see you. And I could tell your guests were probably like, "What just happened? Are you famous?" Because I was like, truly fangirling. It's such a big deal to me, and just made my night. And then actually that night was even crazier. Like, I got to meet you, and then after the hotel, Mark took me to his kind of secret bar meetup later that night, and I met Jason Aaron and Brian Azzarello. And then this only like one listener is going to understand what I'm talking about here. But then while I was at that bar having the best night of my life, I'd met John Suntress. I was with all these heroes. The Doughboys walk in, which is a podcast from LA that I love and listen to all the time. And they were for some reason in Chicago at this bar. So at that point, I was like, I'm getting put down tonight. This is like my owner's crafting the best night of my life, and they're going to put me down. But John, it was fantastic. As I've said before, like listening to Word Balloon, listening to Comic Geek Speak, listening to Off Panel, like all of these things, like they taught me so much about comics, and I truly would not have this job or the love of comics without them. Like, I feel like I'm part of this really funny, like, first generation of editors that really grew up on comic book podcasts. You know, like the silver age of comics on reading comics. It was that first age of creators. And for me and my friends, it's all like, we're the first people who, like, we came in the industry and you'd meet someone for the first time and it'd be funny because you're like, I've heard you talk for 12 hours, you know, and not you, I've heard you talk for hundreds. I mean, these creators I've heard talk for dozens of hours. And, you know, it's so funny because, like, the other editors will have these stories about the creators and the people they worked with. And you're like, oh, I kind of have stories about them too, because I've listened to them tell stories for hours as if I'm at BarCon one table over. So, John, I owe you my career. It's so great to be here. It's incredible.
Well, it's embarrassing, but very kind. But also, if in any way, if my interviews with people, it's not me, it's the guests. But and I recognize that in terms of helping get more knowledge about the business and understand how the donuts are made and then what you need to do, that's wonderful. And also, it's people know when they meet me at conventions or at restaurants and stuff, it is very flattering. And I had 30 years in Chicago radio, and and that's always nice too when people remember my radio years. But no, it's ridiculous, and it's really nice. And yeah, man, you were great a couple months ago, right in the dead of winter. Thank God we're in spring. It's like 10 degrees outside on a Saturday night. I think it was probably a Saturday, and I'm like almost ready to be like, all right, I'll eat something and then I'll go to bed. I'm basically in my my sweats to sleep in and stuff. And all of a sudden, Tim Seeley texts me, and he's like, "Hey, me and Jake Williams are out, and we're not that far from you. You want to come out?" And I saw what bar you guys were at, and I'm like, "Well, it's only 10 minutes away." I'm like, "All right, yeah, let me throw clothes on."
My version of that story, I was with Tim Seeley, and we had been out that night, and we had just gone to like one bar, and we were going to a second, and I knew you were a Chicago guy, obviously, and we were in Chicago. It's important for the story. I was visiting home. Whenever I visit home, I'm kind of from around Peoria, Illinois. Whenever I go to visit home, I always kind of stop in Chicago and see a couple buddies for a few nights. And it's become a really fun tradition to go and see Tim and Tim knows Chicago better than anybody. He knows the Chicago bar scene, just bar none, better than anyone. Absolutely. It's incredible to go out with him. So I was out with him. We're at like one bar, and I was like, dude, at some point, like, we got to get John Suntries out to one of these. And Tim was like, oh, John would come out tonight. And I was like, he'd come out tonight? And he's like, yeah, I'll text him right now. He texts you, and sure enough, you're like, yeah, I'm down to come hang. And I was like, no way. What a night. And truly, I have friends that like I hit up like a group chat, like bragging about it that night. And they're like, we can't believe you. Like, we cannot believe you're out with John right now. Like, it's incredible. It's the best.
Well, honestly, so many of my friends, I mean, I'm single and happy, but so many of my friends are married. They got kids. And, I mean, honestly, especially the ones that are in my age group and stuff, it's like, we go out and everything. I mean, we're not getting together for the 4:30, dinner special. But, the great thing was, so we, I come out, we hang out for like an hour or two or whatever. And they're like, okay, we're going to the next bar. I'm like, yeah, all right. Driver, this is where I get off. I'm sorry.
Yeah. There was no chance we're getting you to a second location. We were asking, you're like, no.
I know, I felt bad. I honestly, Jake, I thought, and really, you guys know it was not personal at all, because it was great meeting you again. And Tim's one of my best friends in town and stuff. So yeah, no, it sucks, man. When I started Word Balloon in the early aughts, all of them were young. A lot of them were still single, and we'd have like, meetups at Challengers, one of my favorite comic shops here in town, Patrick and Dell and everything. And they're great hosts, and or we just go bar hopping around. Me and the guys from Around Comics, another local show and everything. We'd all hang out with creators and things. And yeah, it was such a good time. And then everybody started getting married. Everybody started having kids. So yeah, I mean, and I respect that. That's, the circle of life. It's all right. And, we get together. It's so weird though, because now, C2E2 is a couple weeks away. And a lot of times it isn't until conventions that even the local people, it's like, oh God, man, we got to wait for this to actually see each other. So
I mean, I have the same thing. I'm in my 20s in LA, and I have the same thing with there's just certain people in LA, certain creators, and it's like you get in the habit of seeing who you see, and there's people you'll see at a con, you're like, we live in the same city. Like I'll be in San Diego and I'll see a bunch of LA people and we'll be like, what are we doing? We gotta actually do something. But like, you know, objects in motion stay in motion, or if they're stopped, they stay motionless. And you just, until you get those things going, they never start going. So, you know, I feel you as well. But dude, it was so sick to go out that night and hang out. And that's the best part about this. When you go out with people that like truly still have that love of comics, you can shoot the shit about creators and comic books and talk about what you're reading and what you're watching. And like you have the most insane pop culture knowledge of anyone. So having you there is just a fountain of knowledge about anything and everyone. So it's such a blast.
I think the word Jake is looking for is loser. No. And we all love this shit. No,
absolutely not.
I always tease. I forget who I was out with. I think actually we were having a condo association meeting, and some of the other people are like, "Oh, you podcast full time? What do you do?" I'm like, "Listen, man, I got a nerd show. It's a lot of garbage." And I would, say things like, "Hey, it's nice and sunny out, everybody. Let's go outside." "Yeah, I'll be in the basement watching reruns. That's okay. You guys go ahead." And that was me at 8 years old. So yeah, man, the sitting at home in the dark watching this stuff, it finally paid off. So I actually have a job that that knowledge comes in handy. So including Godzilla, if I may.
Yes, Godzilla. You were saying, sorry, about Godzilla.
No, I'm saying including watching Godzilla movies, man.
Yeah.
Come on.
I mean, dude, especially like, you were joking at saying, like to know all that stuff makes you a loser. But like, what's so funny about our industry is like, that is like, it is like currency, that knowledge you have. And it's so like, I'm so jealous when I hear like the you and Tom King podcast, and you guys are able to talk about all of these old films that I've never heard of, I've never seen. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so jealous of that knowledge that you guys both have.
You'll get there, man. If you're curious about it, man. I mean, and really, God, it is easier than ever. I mean, truly, I'm that first generation of video rentals. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, old man. But now, I mean, honestly, really, like, we do Scene Missing, Gabe Hartman and I, one of your guys from Godzilla.
I love Gabe Hartman, love him. He's incredible.
And we do Scene Missing about movies and stuff, and we purposely pick movies that you can either watch on like Pluto or Tubi or on YouTube, because there are so many great, like, crappy movies that, I mean, we don't want to go for the obvious. We're not going to talk about movies that eventually will win Oscars or I mean, occasionally, but very rarely. We like the obscure stuff. And that's the great thing. My God, I just had Michael Stratford, who is a big Blaxploitation fan. And we're just marveling at all the crazy throwaway movies, but not only, and just 70s grindhouse movies that are on Tubi for free, just sitting there, and they're great.
But what's so funny, John, is like in so many ways it's easier than ever to watch all these things. But it's also like, in the current attention economy, to sit down and watch a movie feels like going to war sometimes. With just everything on your phone and video games. And like, I saw this tweet once I think about all the time that was like, I hate video games. We need those nerds out cataloging Beatles like they used to. Like these guys used to just like have all these hobbies, and now it's like, you can go and not even play different video games. You can go and play the same video game every single night. And at my worst, that's like a habit I can feel myself falling into, where I'm like, I could have watched 2 movies tonight, and instead I scrolled. I could have like had all of this information into my brain. I could have watched and engaged with these stories. Then the next day at work, I'd have stuff to talk about, and I could, and engage my friends about at the bar. But instead, I'm like, I don't know. I scrolled. I don't remember any of it. I played the same video game again. I don't know. So like, actually now I'm jealous of like the ability to just like, instead of like screwing off to do something, watching 2 movies tonight or something, and really like adding it to my brain. For me, it's like I almost need that like catalyst to actually go out and do it. So what I love about living in Los Angeles is we have all of these like the retro cinemas, that are putting back up movies. Like I'll see a lot of old movies at like New Beverly or at Vidiot's or at Vista, and that's an absolute blast to go to these revival cinemas and see those movies. But
plus you get the actors or the filmmakers to be at these theaters and do Q&As. I remember I was shooting, and forgive me because this sounds so like, bourgeois for me to say this, but I was shooting this show, Prophets of Science Fiction, for the History Channel. And while I was there, like, Oh man, it's too bad he couldn't come a couple days earlier. We went and saw the Long Goodbye. Elliot Gould, who stars in it and plays Philip Marlowe, a Robert Altman film from the early 70s. And like, hey, he was doing a Q&A. I'm like, God damn it. Occasionally we get, Chicago, it's always New York or LA. Occasionally Chicago will get a bite of the apple and we'll get a filmmaker to come to our show place, Revival House, the Music Box, and they'll do Q&As there. And the Noir Festival that Eddie Muller does in various cities is always here in the fall. So Eddie always comes for a couple days and hosts a bunch of movies, and that's a lot of fun. But yeah, man, no, I'm very envious on the LA scene.
Awesome. I mean, dude, the Music Box, though, the Music Box is one hell of a theater. That is an incredible spot. But yeah, my most recent that I saw was for the re-release of like the Scott Pilgrim anime. This is this is not the most recent movie I saw one of these, but the most recent, like seeing like some people present it. I got to see Edgar Wright in conversation with Brian Lee O'Malley in front of Scott Pilgrim at the Egyptian. The Egyptian is just stunning. It is a beautiful theater. Netflix bought it and reopened it recently, so they don't show as much revival stuff as they used to, but they still keep that on rotation a little bit. But it feels like a museum in there. It is stunning. It is just beautiful. But yeah, it's awesome, man.
That's cool. So, were you a lifelong fan of Godzilla? Like, where were you as far as fandom in Godzilla before you got the job?
Yeah, so it's funny, and I this one of the interview questions I have to field, but I like Godzilla a lot. I'm a lifelong fan of comics, and I like Godzilla a lot, and I think that you can kind of put that alchemy together and kind of see the direction that I've taken Godzilla, right? So I think that I've always been a fan of Godzilla, and I've always gone to the theater whenever a new Godzilla movie comes out. Like I was saying to you, what's so funny is like, there are 40 Godzilla movies out that most people have not seen, but if they release a new one, everyone will go see that movie. And it's so funny because it's like, why don't you just watch the old ones? And it's just like this like weird, like, oh, there's no reason to, there's no event, there's no catalyst. And I was kind of the same way before I started working on it, where it was like, I needed one of these new legendary MonsterVerse movies to come out to go to the theater and watch a Godzilla movie, which I always did. And when I did, it was incredible. And one of the best things about modern Godzilla movies is that technology has really caught up to the concept. And that's not to say the rubber suit actors are not fantastic. They are. And what's funny now is, and I'm kind of hitting at different threads, what's funny now is in the world of AI, like it almost makes those rubber suit movies more valuable because it's so incredible to watch people pull off these special effects.
Yes.
But back to the original train of thought, these movies in the CGI, they're able to bring Godzilla to life in a way that the scale of it is so epic and extraordinary. So like when you're watching those movies, especially if you can go see it in IMAX, like these legendary MonsterVerse films, it's like, oh my gosh, it feels so real. And it really makes you feel like you're on the ground in the middle of a Godzilla attack. And that's so exciting and so thrilling. And then, Godzilla -1 comes out and they really treat Godzilla they treat the concept of Godzilla with such a weight to it, and they really figured out an incredible human story. I mean, a kamikaze pilot who feels guilty because he's still alive after the war. I mean, what a character to follow in a movie. But all that to say, I was not someone who had a ton of Godzilla figures. I was not someone who had seen the entire catalog of movies, but I knew I really liked Godzilla. So when I started putting together the comic, I started asking myself, like, well, Godzilla is inherently incredible. It's an awesome premise. I love the character design. And I go see these new movies. So like, what is stopping me from being that next level fan? What's stopping me from like really having picked up the comics in the past? What would get me to engage with it in this way? And that's kind of how we birthed this Kaisei era, right? Where we wanted to take Godzilla and make the most comic booky version of Godzilla possible, right? And when we talk about that, I feel like for the longest time, licensed comics were trying to be these like approximations of the mediums that the original film or story comes from, right? And in doing that, it kind of inherently can feel lesser than if you're not really leaning into the comic book medium. So for us, it was all about taking this concept of Godzilla, which we all agree as a society is an incredible concept. We all love Godzilla, and finding just the most comic book version possible of this. So a couple things we did with that. We created human characters that could go toe-to-toe with Godzilla, because sometimes if you're watching one of the movies, it can feel disjointed. You're seeing a human storyline, you're watching the Godzilla storyline, and you're seeing humans and you're seeing Godzilla. So we're like, let's mash that up. Let's do the whole thing. And now we literally have a human character that defeated Godzilla, absorbed its essence, and basically like hulks out into Godzilla, as we're going. So we're going to do these wild comic book premises. And then the other big thing was like Godzilla versus America, which is like, well, I know one thing people would love to do that the movies aren't doing is like, let's take Godzilla and have it stomp around your hometown, So we got creators from those cities to write and illustrate these shorts where they're having Godzilla stomp through their neighborhoods. That's something you're not going to get out of a movie, and something only comics are going to give you, which is what we're trying to do with all these licensed properties, give you the comic book version of it. I think it's such a great question, because I think that the answer to that question really unlocks everything we've done with Godzilla so far. But John, I'm curious about you though. Did you grow up watching a ton of Godzilla movies?
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Again, and ironically, timing wise, 2 weeks from now, I'm moderating Svenguli's panel at C2E2, the great horror host. Yeah. And I go back to the rabbit ear days where you put tinfoil on the rabbit ears to get the UHF channel in, pre-cable, everybody. Not only pre-internet, pre-cable. And man, all these UHF channels, these were low-budget movies. This is all they could afford. So, and of course, the whole monster movie television craze, it started in the 50s with Shock Theater, and that's when they made first the Universal 30s and 40s catalogs available to TV stations. Creature of the Black Lagoon probably was the more recent, movies that they included in that. And then, when the 60s happened and we had all the Toho movies, again, that's how we got them. They played in theaters, but they played in the crappy theaters, the grindhouse theaters. And, I only started watching them as a little kid on TV on Saturday afternoons, or they'd have Godzilla Week on the 3:30 in the afternoon movie before the 5 o'clock news. So, yeah, man, we'd watch these things. And I always bring up Quentin Tarantino's theory about those movies, and I find that amazing, and I wish I thought along those lines back then. But he's like, we're watching an alternate universe where Japan won the war, and they are the dominant superpower of the world, and that's why when Godzilla emerges, it is the Japanese that are dealing with the problem, because they're the biggest world power. I find that fascinating. And we get the occasional guys like Nick Adams was this middling movie and television star. He made a couple Godzilla movies. People like that. Of course, the great Raymond Burr in the original. Well, in the Americanized version.
The American original. That's the funniest thing in the world to me. God. I cannot believe to Americanize that movie. They they edited in an American reporter, basically just to stand around and be like, "This is crazy."
Yeah, right now. Yes, yeah, and especially his roles after that as Perry Mason in Ironside. So, especially if you're watching that stuff from the 70s, you're crying, laughing that Ironside, the guy in the wheelchair, is now standing up and, the monster seems to be devouring the city. It's like, all right, thanks, Raymond. We could see that. Thank you. Well, that's why I'm excited, Jake, for something that's coming up, right? And that's the horror of Godzilla.
Yeah, the horror of Godzilla. And actually, just really fast, because you mentioned Svengoolie, you should show him, as long as he promises not to sue us, that in Godzilla versus Chicago, Ryan Brown and Mike Costa included a bit of a parody of him, which is this character, Fangoolie, that is inspired and visually stealing a bit from Svengoolie. Unless he wants to sue us, in which case it's not based on him at all. But yeah, so horror of Godzilla, which you just had up, is, man, it's incredible. For one thing, it's just an excuse to give Tristan Jones, who is one of the best artists in the business. People might know him from more recently Event Horizon, but before that, he did some work at Aliens, on Aliens over at Dark Horse. And he is just, man, he is stunning. He does this thing with his art where he mixes a realism and a stylized thing together in such a fun way, where it's so detailed and it's so realistic and it makes you feel like you're there, but he does that without losing any of the style of a comic book, right? Which is such a fun thing that he does. It's fantastic. But yeah, so the horror of Godzilla it's going to be insane. So it's the Kaisei era version of the first Godzilla attack. And you were talking about...
Define what Kaisei is for people.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Kaisei era is our new Godzilla publishing initiative at IDW. We're about, if it's March, we're like 9 months deep into this right now. So it is this world where Godzilla started attacking in 1954 and did not stop. So he was not defeated like he was in the original movie. Godzilla's rampage continues for 70 years, and we enter in 2025, right, when the first book comes out. And in this world, our characters have been battling with Godzilla and this kaiju onslaught for 70 years. And you really see how the world has been shaped by that. And one thing is, like, technology always has these like incredible breakthroughs during wartime, and they've been in war for 70 years. So it's kind of a sci-fi universe where they've had to develop all these interesting gadgets and pieces of weaponry in order to combat Godzilla and the other kaiju. It's also a world where, kind of going back to your Quentin Tarantino theory, it's a world where America did not exactly win the Cold War. So America, basically post this original Godzilla attack, we reveal that Godzilla's attack was kind of spawned by these two scientists, and I don't want to give too much away about horror Godzilla. Basically, they found this energy source that they believed to be the energy of life, and they started experimenting with it, viewing it not as a weapon, but as something that could bring great healing possibilities. So they started experimenting with this, but they basically captured this god essence that lures Godzilla out of its slumber, creates a bunch of new kaiju, and just leads to this just insane devastation, as we have like the classic idea of humans meddling with things they shouldn't be. So Godzilla, we view as kind of really putting the god in Godzilla. It's this being that can control this Kaisei energy. So it can kind of alter the energy of life itself. Godzilla is incredibly powerful. I feel like that really like gives him his crown as the king of the monsters in our universe, is his ability to control this. But yeah, it's this life force that, kind of like a cancer, a little bit of it flows through all things, but too much of it can turn a lizard into Godzilla, So when we meet our characters, the American G-Force has found this boy that seems to be able to control this Kaisei energy in the same way that Godzilla can. And they're basically like, well, we're going to make this kid fight Godzilla. And our whole first arc is building towards this giant kind of battle to the death between this like 17, 18-year-old kid and the king of the monsters. And it's very fun. It's very Top Gun. It's very X-Men. It's very manga inspired. Then we have a couple other books in this universe, one of them being Godzilla Escape the Dead Zone. And this book is kind of our lone wolf and cub. It's our Vertigo book. We reveal that part of the American Pacific Northwest has been completely destroyed. And instead of trying to fix it, they just walled it off from the rest of the country. And the American government has told everyone there's nothing alive past those walls. But the comic book takes us over that wall and reveals that things are very much alive. And for the last few decades, they've been mutating and evolving and building their own societies. We follow this character who is this basically Clint Eastwood, if Clint Eastwood was part kaiju, as he kind of goes town to town, from enclave to enclave, inside of this like Mad Max over the garden wall kaiju infested world, having adventures. And then finally, in our world, so many of the Godzilla movies, the plots revolve around aliens coming to Earth and bringing kaiju with them as a way to kind of like destabilize the globe. And in our universe, the aliens have not come yet. So we follow all of the space kaiju in this book called Starship Godzilla, where Mechagodzilla, which is originally an alien creation, is we've turned it into Starship Godzilla. And we have a crew, basically like a Guardians of the Galaxy or Firefly-esque crew that flies around inside of Mechagodzilla doing these space-based missions where they basically try to capture kaiju so they can't be used by the zillions who are trying to conquer the universe. So it's all these crazy concepts and these wild ideas, and people are either going to love them or hate them as they come out. But for me, it's just like comics are the place to take big swings, just big, massive swings. So we're having a blast.
Well, and I'm curious because, again, some of these directions, like turning Mechagodzilla into a spaceship, is brilliant. And that's why I have the cover ready. And, of course, Horror Godzilla, because that's really kind of a great way to bring 54 Godzilla into the modern day and that sensibility. Yeah. But like Tom Scioli, and I'll let you give me the title of the book. But that's a great kind of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen sort of team up of various centuries or decades of pulp heroes facing Godzilla. Give me the title. And did Tom pitch that to you guys? I mean, because that's a really original idea and way to use Godzilla. And especially Tom is really doing this great old-timey looking art that matches the decade in which the stories take place.
Yeah, so okay, I'll answer the question about Tom, and then to kind of answer your kind of meta question about how these things get pitched, I'll jump back to Starship Godzilla in a second, because I think that's a really interesting concept to final product where you can really see the different stages and how an idea evolves. But for Tom Scioli, man, probably, you know, I worked on Beneath the Trees as well, so maybe like top 2 books that have my name in them. But like Godzilla's Monsterpiece Theater is the book Tom Scioli made, and that is 100% Tom Scioli. That is Tom Scioli's pitch. Those are Tom Scioli's ideas. But what's great about Tom is he will bring these ideas to you, and you'll read a script, and it'll be the funniest thing you've ever read, and then you might have like 1 or 2 little ideas that tie a couple things together. And Tom is an incredible collaborator, and he's just like, yeah, great, I'll do that. That sounds awesome. Yeah, cool. And I'll add it in. Like, he is an editor's dream, because like literally, like, he will bring you these ideas that are like 95% fully realized. Your job is just to read it and be like, oh, I think this would also be cool. And he's like, perfect. Yeah, let's do that too. And it's a dream. But basically the premise of that story is it begins as The Great Gatsby. And we watch Jay Gatsby as he leaves Daisy behind. He goes off to war. We then cut back to kind of the start of the movie where Gatsby is throwing one of his massive parties in his Long Island estate, looking out across the water to Daisy's home. And then what does he see but Godzilla rising up in the water, coming to stomp all over his mansion and attack the party. And during this, Gatsby runs to a boat. He crosses the water, goes to see Daisy, but he's too late. Daisy's hurt in the attack. And then Gatsby, you know, he's this character that has this just kind of like undying will. And in the book, it's this undying love towards Daisy. And in this, because Daisy is kind of taken from him, his just like unending pursuit shifts to stopping Godzilla. So we have this really funny thing where you have this idea of G-force in the Godzilla movies, but in our G-force, it's the Gatsby force. So he puts together kind of this group of people and these group of great thinkers across the 20th century to take down Godzilla. And he goes to people like Nikola Tesla is in the book, and he goes to people like Dracula. Oh, Dracula comes in later, but he goes to Sherlock Holmes as one of the early recruits for this. The Time Machinist comes into play. Jules Verne is there, and it's so funny and it's so good. And for my money, Tom Scioli is one of the few people working in comics who really understands the point of cartooning, right? Like, his books, they're just these master classes in playing with the comic book page. And I wish we could kind of inverse the comic industry where every book looks like that and the anomaly is more of a fully rendered thing, because I just think he has so much fun on the page and he's enjoying himself so much. But what's fun right now is, honestly, we're starting to see that at higher levels as well. Like Nick Dragotta's work on Absolute Batman, like, he's cartooning, you know, like there are incredible sequences of just like visual cartooning happening on the page. So yeah, it's a really fun time to be working in comics. I feel like there's kind of been a shift where suddenly we can get a little sillier with it again.
Yeah, every now and then an artist like that emerges. I think Oming was like that when he was doing Powers in the early 2000s. And some people are like, a cartoon for a crime book? And it's like, yeah, it works. And again, you just need to relax your brain. But no, Tom, I mean, I've told the Twilight Zone editors at IDW how much I love Tom's book, and I told Tom himself as well. So yeah, he talked about both the Godzilla stuff and the Twilight Zone stuff that he does. And no, he's great. And that's the thing, man. No, it's interesting, you know, finding the readership. But the great thing is there are so many of these artists, men and women, who, you know, were sitting in their free periods back in junior high drawing Godzilla, and now they get to do it professionally. And I know before your time at IDW, Dave Wachter, great example of another wonderful artist that really, now he's more the realistic side, and man, that guy has just upped his game in the 20 plus years I've known him, and just watching his evolution as an artist. But you really, like, Gabe when he did the Godzilla Invades book that he wrote and drew, and Seeley writing the Chicago book and stuff. No, these are people that really did love and are inspired in it and stuff. So I'd imagine it's not hard to find great artists to do great Godzilla stories.
No, it's not. I mean, it's so funny because when you first take over a major license, and Godzilla is my first time running a license, right? And there's stuff that I think you imagine about, like, man, I'll reach out to everyone, and everyone in the world would of course they're going to want to work on Godzilla. So like initially you're almost surprised by the no's you get when you reach out to people and you're like, really? You don't want to do this? All right. I mean, it's Godzilla. Isn't that awesome? But, people have exclusive contracts and they have ongoing series and they're busy with other things. But no, in general, artists especially, I think with writers, there can be a little bit of like, I don't know what my Godzilla story would be, because Godzilla isn't such an interesting character because in a lot of ways it's not a character. Godzilla is a force of nature. So you really have to create an original idea, just whole cloth, and then have Godzilla invade that idea that you've created. So you almost have to like check your drawer and see if you have any original ideas that would be better if Godzilla was involved in them. And a lot of ideas are, but that's kind of the challenging thing is you reach out to different writers and you're like, hey, if you want to do like an evergreen Black Label thing, like if you just have any ideas for Godzilla for like a miniseries or something, like please join. And sometimes the people are just like, I don't know what I'd do with Godzilla. But you don't hear that from artists because artists, they get tired of drawing humans and they love drawing a big monster attacking a city. So artists by and large are thrilled to come on board, whether it's a cover or actual interior work. They say yes.
Am I right? Did Van Jensen write Godzilla Heist?
Yes, I love Van Jensen. Van was
so do I. And then last time we talked, we absolutely brought up Godzilla Heist. You go ahead and explain the premise. I mean, it's there in the title, but feel free.
Yeah. Well, Godzilla Heist is, when you talk about all these books that like need to be a comic, that's a book that right now is a comic, but that could be an incredible movie. But the premise of Godzilla Heist is, during a kaiju attack, there's complete pandemonium, right? And this group of crooks basically find out a way to draw Godzilla to a location. And while Godzilla is stomping around the city, they perform heists. So initially this guy uses it to rob a casino, but there's different things you kind of follow. It's a heist movie, so there's tons of double crossing I don't want to spoil, but he basically gets hired by a group of mercenaries to help them rob the the Ministry of Defense in England. So that's what our story becomes, is this giant heist across London where they're stealing this, it's if you see some of the covers, it's going to be revealed what they're stealing, but an object of great importance in the Godzilla canon, they're stealing from under the Ministry of Defense. And such a fun premise. The artist of that book was Kelsey Ramsey, and she did just an incredible job. And Van's so fun to work with. He's one of those guys who really loves like kind of rolling up his sleeves and pitching ideas with you, and you can really talk through the books with him, and he's a blast.
No, I love Van's comics, but also I'm really excited for the TV and film opportunities that he's got coming up. And I suspect, much like a Mark Guggenheim or some of the other writers, that graduated's the wrong word, but you know what I mean. Finally got Hollywood to take notice and stuff. We'll see what kind of comics we get from Van, if any. And at least we had Van while we had him and stuff. I told him to promise me to come back when some of the TV and film stuff starts happening.
Well, those things are always funny because, like, unless you go all the way up to like a, I guess we don't talk about him anymore, but like a Joss Whedon level where you're directing Avengers or whatever, people typically come back because there's a lot of money over there, but the creative freedom of comics is extraordinary. So like you go through a few rounds of studio notes on the Lego movie or whatever, I'm sure you start thinking, you know what, it's not so bad when I just write for an artist.
Also, sadly, because Hollywood is contracting, not just because of Paramount buying Warner Brothers, but really the residue from both COVID and the strikes, Hollywood is still picking up the pieces. In fact, I really look forward to hearing some of the more if they're encouraging or state of the industry kind of things that might creep out of the Oscar coverage that we're going to get on Sunday. But no, man, you're right about that. And in fact, guys like Guggenheim are a great example that, got a lot of bites of the apple as far as TV and film. And thankfully, he is still cranking out comics because of the reasons that you're saying. But also, there are more writers than projects out there right now that have had experienced writers. So they're having trouble getting their pitches heard or joining writing staff. So yeah, man, at least thank God there are comics that they can turn to and do fun, interesting ideas. But no, I loved Godzilla Heist. That's like just such a great, and you're right, it would have made an amazing movie. But yeah, it's like, oh my God.
11 with the Godzilla film, and you get all of the fun of both movies. Like, come on, it's perfect. It's incredible.
100%.
Are you a listener to the Town podcast? It's a podcast.
No, tell me about the Town. Is that the Hollywood? Is that like a Hollywood?
It's a Hollywood podcast. It's by this ex-entertainment lawyer named Matt Bellany. And I first found out about it, and this is so silly, but it was mentioned in the Studio, that Seth Rogen show, which that's incredible too if you haven't seen it.
I like it.
Studio.
Yeah.
Okay, you hate it, but I liked it.
No, I honestly do like it, but I don't love it the way it's funny because honestly, and I don't mean to keep name dropping, but Bendis and I talk about it. Oh my God, it's the greatest thing in the world. I'm like, it gets a little overly black comedy silly, but I really know. I love. Hey, Ike Barinholtz, Chicago guy.
Yeah,
known him for years. Known him when he was doing
group.
Well, not personally, but just aware of his work as a sketch comedy guy, both in Chicago and in Amsterdam as well. Yeah. But so I'm thrilled for him, and he's great. And I love Seth Rogen, and I really do love the cast as well. It's just too at times, but my God, that first episode where they're breaking Martin Scorsese's heart, and him, Seth and Ike are having a conversation in the forefront, and in the back, you literally are seeing Martin Scorsese weeping because he found out the truth that they really don't want to make his horrible, Jim Jones movie that's too depressing, and they want to do a crazy Kool-Aid movie. That was hilarious, man. So there are funny things up, but yeah, I'm not a huge studio person.
What's funny about that first episode, and might be part of the reason that you weren't as into like the remaining episodes of it, is it's kind of like when you see a trailer for a movie and you go to the movie and you're like, this is really different than what they promised me. That first episode of the Studio feels like it's setting up like a prestige dramedy, and like they're going to keep following these kind of the story hooks that they're setting up in that first series. And you watch that in the first episode, then you watch that second episode, and you're like, oh, okay, this is a contained episode that's just going for laughs, and like the stuff that was set up before isn't really being hit on. And the third episode continues that trend, and they eventually get back to those plot lines. But I was pretty shocked when I turned on that second episode and it wasn't like immediately picking up all of the plot lines that were kind of set up in the first one. But I learned to really like that, but it does take a second. It's very kind of jarring to not be the show that it feels like it's setting up.
It really wasn't that, honestly, because I liked the Ron Howard, Anthony Mackie storyline. Sure. I thought that was good. It's hit and miss for me. It honestly is. And again, again, it's got its fans, and certainly, award season did it justice. So that's great. But yeah, and again, I'm sure there's going to be more seasons now. But regarding Apple, please, first of all, finish your thought. Tell me about The Town.
Yes. Okay. The podcast. So The Town is this incredible podcast where this ex-entertainment lawyer, he basically, the premise is that he's still really involved and really talks to everyone. And he's this like very plugged in Hollywood. And the podcast is basically, here's what the town is talking about. But what's really fun about it is he will have like one of my favorite episodes, you should start here, is the weekend after, what is that? The little girl who's a robot movie. What are those called? Megan. Right after Megan 2 came out.
Okay. Yeah.
The Monday, he had Jason Blum on the podcast, and Jason Blum, the Monday after it bombed, comes on and gives like this like retrospective about why he thinks it didn't work. It was just incredible. It's one of the best podcasts I've ever listened to. They're just like having this like very honest discussion about like, you know what? I think we changed genre too much. I think we thought Megan could be anything. I think Megan probably is just a horror. And the thing's still in theaters. It's been out for 4 days. And he's having this really just open and honest interview. It's incredible.
Well, that is incredible because again, try and get that kind of and not that I'm trying everybody, because I'm certainly not. So funny. I was telling you off the air, Mercury's in retrograde. I have I have this interview I did with Tom Brevoort, and hey, the horse race now, DC and Marvel. You mentioned Nick Dragotta, absolute Batman. And, DC right now, I would say, Greg Rucka once said they're like the tortoise and the hare, DC and Marvel. And Marvel's the more nimble one that can usually juke and stuff. But all of a sudden, the hare thinks that it's a head, and he suddenly looks and there's the tortoise just crawling ahead and stuff, and actually, beating them for a second or whatever. And I think that's kind of what's happening with DC, where there are ideas that are clicking more between the two for DC. So anyway, I had set up this interview with Brevoort, and Marvel's like, well, what do you want to talk to him about? And I'm like, hey, I'm like, no, it's just a friendly thing, because I don't give a fuck about the horse race. I really don't. And I mean, my God, Tom has been at Marvel for decades, and also his blog is really interesting. So I'm like, hey, I'm not Rich Johnson. I'm telling everybody this now on the record, because again, Mercury's in retrograde, and I left. So I was reassuring Tom before we started recording, but I'm already recording, before it's actually live. Yeah. It was one of the pre-records, and I left it on, and it's still on if you watch, everybody, or listen. Certainly it's on the video side for the audio audience.
I listened on Spotify and did not hear that, but it's on the video.
Yeah. And I mean, it's all innocent, but I really was like, oh fuck, what did I say? Jesus Christ, I hope I didn't say anything to offend anybody. And I didn't. And Tom laughed at all, laughed at everything, and he was great. But no, man, it is rare to get people to be that candid. So no, I would love to hear Blum. Because honestly, I think Blum and A24 are the hair in today's Hollywood. And while the old guard is trying to figure out what the fuck to do, they're like, hey, we just spent $15 million on Farts Out Your Ass, a new horror movie, and Farts Out Your Ass makes $200 million, and they're sitting with profit, and these jerks are making, the $300 million movie that bombs. So it is interesting when a Megan 2.0 doesn't make it, and it's great that he's willing to come on and say why.
I know, and it's tough because obviously there's it's so interesting to hear that from people, and it's hard because obviously Tom Brevoort can't have a discussion right now about people are talking about, I'm not talking about my own opinion right now, I'm talking about the public perception is that DC has had a banner year, and that some people listen to me, I'm a politician right now, some people are alleging that Marvel did not have as strong of a year. And when you look at that, it's like, obviously Marvel's doing great. Obviously they're making great stuff. Obviously they're going to come back. Obviously they're going to, going to return bigger and better. And it'd be so awesome to hear right now, from, them themselves, well, here's the inside scoop. And that's the difference between the podcast and going to BarCon, honestly. It's I was talking about the podcast being digital BarCon, but you don't want to throw people under the bus. You don't want to talk about things not working, because especially in comics, every artist on every book is doing the impossible. A comic book is an unsustainable thing to create. It is so hard. So you don't want to listen to a podcast and hear your editor kind of being yeah, we've had some misses recently, because you're I just gave a year of my life to that miss. So how about you?
I'm glad you brought up BarCon too, because honestly, there are some irresponsible people that have blogs and podcasts, and it's hey, they suddenly become Woodward and Bernstein, and it's well, they never said they're off the record. It's it's after hours, and people are just relaxing, and they might be a little more candid because they've had a couple, and they're not drunk or anything like that, but they might just be momentarily frustrated, and all of a sudden it's a headline as and again, I don't mean to keep picking on Rich, because again, I get along great with Rich, and Rich and I we're on very good terms, and I respect what he does. I do feel for publishers when he screws up a marketing plan, and they're yeah, we're going to talk about this in May, and Rich has got the information in February, and it's all right, well, I guess we're talking about it now. Thanks, Rich. And again, I get that on both sides. I really do get that on both sides, because we all want to know what's happening. We all want to know what's going to happen in the next issue as readers. But it's hey, I know creators that are fuck, man, I was just, thinking I could relax, and some asshole is, eavesdropping and apparently creator X is very upset with publisher Y because this happened. And it's fuck you, man. That's shitty. That's again. And truly, that's why BarCon, there are fewer and fewer creators that are hanging out, because they don't want that shit to get out there and everything. And I mean, that's why and again, my show's an entertainment show. I'm here for, I want us all to win. I want the publishers to win. I want the readers to win. I want the podcasters to win. I want the bloggers to win. Everybody. But, and again, I think there's enough interesting things in the business to talk about without, again, spilling government secrets. So I do understand. I mean, it used to be a lot harder, and especially I had to kind of gain the trust of the big two. I'd be like, hey, just here for entertainment, just here for fun. I want the fun stories. Brevoort has been there for decades and has seen so many other things. And also, I think now can talk comfortably about, God, I can't remember, Fear Itself, Fractions event from like 15 years ago. And it was an Avengers event that didn't work. Yeah. And Maddie came on and it was kind of pouring his soul and like, well, I think this went wrong. And I'm like, Maddie, it's okay, man. I go, so you take a big, like you were saying about Godzilla books, you take a big swing. And sometimes the public approaches,
man. And that's something fans online, I really feel for Marvel right now. And look, they're still doing great. So I still think they're fine publisher, obviously. Yeah. But I just mean, like, when I say feel for them, I feel for like the fan reaction gets so silly because you start hearing people being like, oh, what are they doing over there? It's every bad decision. It's like, they're not making bad decisions. They're making comics. And
it's a loud minority. Sorry, Jake, but it's a loud, and that's social media. Social media gives a loud voice to few people. And this is the shitty part. I mean, I wouldn't have podcasting, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for social media.
And what's funny too about all of it is, like, first of all, like, things ebb and flow. So like Marvel spent 15 years telling what I think is the greatest comic book kind of like, what's the word for it? Like a meta story of all time, starting with like Avengers Disassembled, going up to Hickman's Secret Wars. And that's 15 years of some of the best, that's 15 years of the best comics ever.
Yeah.
So like, that's 10 years ago that ended, and that still had great comics following it. But like, things have to like give them time. You can't just go from the best thing ever to the best thing ever all the time. You got to kind of like have, periods where, maybe you're keeping the status quo a bit more. And also, like, it's not that Marvel's doing bad. It's that DC kicked the gates off comics and is doing some of the coolest things ever right now. And Marvel's going to catch up. But DC is doing, it's just that like DC is doing so extraordinary at the moment.
Well, and that stuff could have blown up in their faces. I mean, honestly, they're very fortunate, and again, very talented people. No disrespect to any of the absolute men and women. They're on my show, and I'm very pleased with what they're doing. I keep wanting to bug more of them to come on my show, like Dennis Camp and people like that haven't been on Word Balloon. I would love to talk to Dennis about what he did with Manhunter, and of course, that wonderful series that he's doing at Image. The Crisis series that he's doing at Image is a great thing as well. Yeah. And just a really smart guy. But Kelly Thompson with Wonder Woman, and Snyder with Batman, and Jason Aaron with Superman, Lemire with Flash and everything. They're great. I'm forgetting who did. It's not Mark Russell. Al Ewing doing Absolute Green Lantern and stuff. All that stuff. But again, Al's killing it at Marvel as well at the same time. His Thor stuff. I loved his Venom stuff. I respect, and honestly, I am enjoying Joe Kelly's Spider-Man. I know it's not for everybody.
I'm fallen off a little bit, and I just caught up on it. It's really fun. I mean, what's funny too, man, is people who hear about concepts and they want to say like, that sounds dumb, but they haven't read it, So like, you're like, Spider-Man in space, I don't want him in space. And it's like, well, you're not reading the book. And if you're reading the book, it's really cool how he gets Spider-Man to space. It's fun. It's exciting. It's different,
I just had Klaus Janson on, and we were talking about Frankencastle when Rick Remender they killed Frank Castle, and he was hanging out with the Legion of Monsters and fighting those things and stuff. And John Romita Jr. and Klaus were doing the art. Rick was writing the story. And yet people were, traditional Punisher fans are like, oh, fuck you. That's the last thing we want. But again, big swing. Hail Hydra, Nick Spencer, big fucking swing. Good. And man, that whole thing just cracked me up. And oh my God, you've destroyed my childhood. You've made Steve Rogers a bad guy. It's like, oh, fuck you. It's comics. He'll be fine. Everything's gonna be fine. That's not the real Captain America. Don't worry.
Yeah. And what's so funny is like, that speaks to in a big way how like I don't know, I feel like when you're creating comics, you kind of feel like, the audience has seen everything. But then to find out like they're tricked by peekaboo,
Yes.
Steve Rogers is a Nazi. It's like, no, you moron. He's not a Nazi.
It underlines that point of some books are people's first books. So I do understand that. Hey, DC fucked up with what was it called? Convergence. And that train wreck of an event. And the tie-in books were fun, but the main event really sucked, where the alien was kind of like Brainiac, miniaturizing not only cities, but like alternate universe things. And like it gave them a chance they had a bunch of it was while they were making the move to Burbank. And God, we're talking about everything but IDW. I apologize, Jake.
No, I mean that's what I was talking about, man. Where the most fun thing in the world is just talk about comics. And I pitched our Godzilla books, and they're great.
Oh no, but there's more to.
Yeah,
but
it's fun just to chat about this stuff,
Yeah, no, but I mean
that's what the experience of finding your podcast is like. I grew up in a small farm town, and all I wanted to do was talk to and hear about people talk about these books. So like listening to the podcast and being in that experience of what we're doing right now, we're like, this podcast, it shouldn't be about just like, let's say the key selling points of Godzilla over and over. Like I'm so proud of those books. We're doing incredible work. We talked about those, and now we get to just shoot the shit. That's the whole point.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I want to finish my thought about Convergence though, because it was this event that everyone hated, and they had planned the main alien to continue to do a sequel book where they focused on him, and nobody wanted it. And this writer came from TV, and this was his first big swing in comics and stuff, and it failed miserably. And friends of his that are regulars of mine are like, hey, if you want to talk to Creator X, people can look it up if they want to. I don't want to shit on the guy because again, he thought it was an interesting idea. I get it. It's totally fine. And also, you never know how much editorial notes will interfere with the story in that case. So regardless, it didn't work. And they're like, hey, if you want to talk to Creator X, and I'm like, I feel bad for him, and I would have nothing positive to say about what he put out there. I always say when you're a guest on a podcast, or when you want a guest on, you're not inviting somebody in your living room to go, hey, you know why you suck? And you know why what you did really sucked? I mean, it's ridiculous. And but again, I hate to say it, but there are some podcasters out there who think they're Woodward and Bernstein and are very happy to tell you what's wrong with your interpretation of a character. I remember one show, I'll tell you off the air, that took this guy to task about the way he was doing a big Marvel hero. And it's like, well, I wrote it this way for a certain reason. Yeah, but that's wrong. That's really wrong. And it's like, shut up. Shut the fuck up. Who the fuck are you? Jeez, I mean, you're a reader, and I'm not saying your opinion isn't valid, but it's like, so's the writers, and clearly the publisher had faith in what he was doing and disagrees with you.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I keep seeing from people online, and I think it's people getting kind of younger people getting into comics, is getting really upset. There's a couple of people at DC that when they are writing comics, it is story first and their version of the character first, but that version of the character might be different than like how you read the character previously. And some younger fans see that and they get really up in arms about it. And like, to me, I'm like, and they'll even say it was a fantastic story, but they wouldn't do that. And you go, no, stop after it was a fantastic story, because they're not real people. And also, like, I think one thing you need to learn about comics is when it is a true ongoing story that is continuing the thread of a character. Like Peter Parker, people sometimes are so confused about comics, and they'll hear Spider-Man, they'll be like, which Spider-Man? And it's like, no, there's actually just one. There's one Spider-Man. Like, these alternate universe versions are not like that. That's like other stuff that's happening. It's very clearly alternate universes. That'd be like saying which Invincible, because there's a couple episodes where he goes around other Invincibles. Like, no, there's one Peter Parker, and it's been the same Peter Parker since the first issue, and we've watched him grow and change. But the DC Comics characters are more like Greek gods, and we watch these archetypes get put into different positions, and they're going to act different ways in the different stories. And to hate on a story because you think they mischaracterized your favorite fictional character, I think is just like, you're confused about what's happening. Like, I think it's actually like, you don't fully understand the idea of the product you're consuming. Like it's basically an Elseworlds is what you're reading. And also like DC is all Elseworlds at this point. They've had 30 crises. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah,
the characters change.
Even the way KO wrapped up and everything is interesting. But I can't agree. As a reader, and that's the other thing, folks. I mean, I'm sitting in the glass house. Regular Word Balloon viewers and listeners know I am incredibly opinionated about modern Star Trek. Thankfully, and I know the IDW people are relieved, I love what you guys are doing with Star Trek. I think it is the best representation of Star Trek, whether it's novels, comics, film, or television out there. And I enjoy and look forward to talking to more and more IDW people because the story's great. Even TV shows that I think aren't very good, the comic adaptations are great. The Kelvin Universe comics from 10 or 15 years ago were great. While I wasn't as crazy about the subsequent movies and things like that.
Right,
so
let me check my break in case John brings up Star Trek notes. Jake Williams and the rest of the IDW publishing loves every Star Trek iteration that has ever been released.
No, I'm sorry. And honestly, I do want to get back to Godzilla because I am curious in terms of dealing with the licensor. Are you dealing with both Toho and Legendary or just one company? How does it work with the relationship with the people that own the rights to Godzilla?
So we are dealing with Toho International, and Toho International is the what's the right word for it? I don't speak corporate, but it's basically a smaller company that represents Toho Global. And Toho Global is the one based out of Japan, and Toho International is the one based out of the Bay Area in the United States.
Okay.
So I spent all my time talking to this incredible dude. His name's Aaron John Gregory. Aaron John Gregory lives in the Bay Area. He's an artist who went to SCAD. He's the coolest dude in the world. And all the Godzilla stuff I run by Aaron. And there's certain rules with Godzilla, and there's certain lines that you can kind of push up against. And if we're not pushing up against those lines, then Aaron can approve it himself. If we start to push the lines too much, then Aaron has to basically send for approval from Toho International. And what I've been told, and this is real, is that a room called the Godzilla Room, which is a group of Japanese businessmen in Tokyo, inside of Toho, once a week, every Tuesday, meet up and they just talk about Godzilla and everything happening with Godzilla. And it's my understanding that when our comics have to go to Japan, they're brought in front of this room of men in Tokyo, and they're basically like, hey, is Jake and his guys allowed to do this? And they make the decision whether or not it's allowed to happen. And I just think that's so cool, honestly. I think it's awesome.
Like a war room.
All these Tokyo businessmen have to approve just the dumb Godzilla ideas we're sending their way. But it's awesome. Honestly, Toho is a dream licensor. And part of that is they understand, like I was saying earlier with the DC stuff, that these characters, these ideas, are constantly reimagined. And Godzilla specifically is a character that the fan base has learned that each iteration is going to be pretty different. So they're used to that, and none of them really believe in this idea of a one true Godzilla. They're happy to see a Showa era, sillier Godzilla. They're happy to see the legendary take. They're happy for a serious return in -1. And I think as long as they get all these different flavors and different mediums, they're excited to see something like the Kaisei era. When we first released that new Godzilla design, which I love, but when we first released it, I was maybe wondering, are people going to have pushback? And across the board, Godzilla heads were just happy to have a new Godzilla. They're just excited to see it, So that's been really fun. It's been a cool fan base to work with. It's been an incredible licensor to work with. Real quick, because I think this is a great kind of segue there as well. Getting back to what I was saying with Starship Godzilla earlier and how that pitch worked is Chris Gooch, the writer of Starship Godzilla. He is an incredible cartoonist based in Australia, and he had worked with Chris Staros at Top Shelf, which is an imprint that IDW now owns, on a couple graphic novels. One of them was called In Utero. It was really, really solid. He did this great work, and one's called Under Earth. And Chris Staros had reached out to me one day and was like, hey, Chris Gooch has an idea for a Godzilla thing, and he passed along an idea. And to kind of set the stage for it, I had kind of known loosely what I wanted the Kaisei era to be. I knew I wanted it to be 70 years after the first attack. I knew I wanted to have mutants based on this like Kaisei energy. I knew I wanted Godzilla to warp the world. I knew our main book would follow kind of like a superhero version of G-Force. And I knew that our sister book would be kind of like a Vertigo on the road title, right? And then from there, like all the other cool stuff that was added by Griffin and Ethan and Pablo Tanuka and Tim Seeley and Nicholas Mejia. That was kind of what we had so far. And I get this pitch from Chris Gooch called Starship Godzilla, except for at the time, it was a much more contained story. And it was not Mecha Godzilla. It was set in the far future, and it was a Frankenstein version of Godzilla itself. So Godzilla had been turned into a Frankenstein starship. And that was the premise of this book. So we followed these kind of much more mean-spirited mercenaries as they were. The entire thing kind of took place during one attack. And it was really cool, and the ideas were awesome. And that version would have been cool. That version would not have been approved by Toho. So I basically got with Aaron. What's so good about our licensor and our relationship, and it's a relationship I like to have with my writers as well. Like I can bring an idea to Aaron at its most like nascent stage, where it's just like, hey, here is just like a concept, and what would a version of this concept look like? What would it need to look like to be approved? And he was like, I was like, first of all, like maybe Mechagodzilla, or maybe even Chris Gooch was like, if they let me, it can be Mechagodzilla instead. And he was like, absolutely can't be Godzilla. Could probably Mechagodzilla. And then I don't think like any of the terrestrial kaiju can be in space. It would have to be the space kaiju out in space. So I brought those notes back to Chris Gooch and was like, hey, I think this would actually fit in really well with this new world we're building. And we can kind of carve out a space for you that's all of the space, you know, and you can have all of the alien races, and you can have all of the alien kaiju, and you can have Mechagodzilla. And like that can be kind of your home base in this new world we're building. And my other kind of request was like, let's build this out more as like an episodic thing. Like I want to see like kind of each issue have like a different mission. I can build up to something more. And then from there, Chris just took the ball and ran with it and developed what we have now. Oh, and then of course, oh man, Oliver Ono, who had done a couple things with us before, done this book called Godzilla Monster Island Summer Camp. He had done a Godzilla Rival series, but Oliver Ono is just an incredible artist. If you look at that book, like the way he renders these alien planets, the detail he brings into it, the style he has, it feels like, I always pitch it as this like lost 80s anime that it feels like we've found and are like releasing in comic book form. But yeah, I feel like that's a fun thing for people to hear of like how it goes from a pitch to an actually approved product and like the different places it hits around the way. Because like I kind of have more of like I want it to be commercial in a sense. I want it to connect to as many people as possible. And Toho has their brand guidelines. And this is a situation where the original book would have been cool, but I think this version is like, would connect to more people. I really like this version we've landed on with Starship Godzilla.
What about the legendary version? Are you ever asked by Toho to, hey, you know, promote the legendary ideas? I'm loving Monarch. I really adored that first season, but I'm really relieved to say the second season has been great. But I'll confess, I am not a fan of the movies. I'm really not. I just think they're big and CGI, and thank God for Monarch, the TV show. I just think there's more characterization there than what I've gotten in the. And I have to be honest, I was disappointed by that first Bryan Cranston Godzilla movie of Legendaries, and just wasn't interested in following the path. So maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there's a lot more characterization for the humans going on the legendary side. Doesn't look like it from the trailer, so I don't know.
What we actually, so the legendary thing, we actually can't touch at all. So legendary is basically the legendary production company is sub-licensing Godzilla from, they're partnering with them and they're creating a new version of Godzilla. And that version of Godzilla is not included in the standard Godzilla license that we are licensing. So we are licensing just the classic Japanese iterations of Godzilla. So that is Showa, that's Heisei, that's Millennium, you know, all of those, that's us. We can't do legendary. So actually most of our job, you can really see how deeply the legendary Godzilla has permeated into the culture. Because if you hire an artist to do Godzilla and you forget to say, wait, it can't look like legendary, you're going to get back a version that's going to borrow a lot from the modern legendary iterations, and we can't have that at all. So a lot of my job is going, sorry, no, can't be pink. Sorry, no, can't have this kind of like lizard triangle body. It needs to be kind of like, looks like a guy in a suit. Like, that's a ton of my job, is like making sure it doesn't look like legendary Godzilla, because that's just not the version that we make comics about. But, you know, other than that, I think that, you know, we're really doing what Legendary is doing in the movies is what we're doing with Kaisei, which is just like, let's reimagine Godzilla for this other thing. So the Legendary universe reimagines Godzilla for kind of modern technology. Like, that's kind of the medium they're playing with. They're playing with the medium of CGI. And I don't say that disparagingly at all. You already heard me talk earlier about how like they're bringing it to life in such a different way. And that's what they're playing with. And what we're doing is like the medium of comic books, and how can we reimagine Godzilla for the comic book page? And yeah, I think there's like fun differences and similarities that you see if you're like contrasting kind of the differences in what we're doing with it. But no, we don't have access to Legendary stuff at all. But Legendary has a publishing division, and they will occasionally publish comics that tie into that universe.
Sure. No, you're right about that. And I forgot about that. And I know Matt Wagner was working with those guys a few years ago, doing some original stuff that maybe they thought eventually would develop into a movie or TV idea. I'm not sure. But yeah, believe me. And again, this is kind of a recurring story on Word Balloon. When I was talking to Kelly Sue DeConnick, Matt Fraction's wife, she's like, "Oh, Matt's doing the Monarch show. That's the Godzilla show." And I'm like, "Oh, I really, you know," and I'm like, God, I hope it's good, because I love Matt. He really is. He's one of my best friends in comics. But I'm like, you know, I don't know if I'm gonna like this, and I don't want to lie, but also I'm not gonna shit on my friend and have him come on and go again. You know why your shit sucks? So it was such a relief, and literally, if you listen to those first episodes after the show came out, and I'm like, oh man, it's good. Thank God it's good. I really am enjoying this. And
I'm sure you have that constantly though, hanging out with creative people, because you're constantly being shown their latest work, and like, if I don't like it, it makes things so much easier if you like it, you know?
If I don't like it, or if I'm not like, you know, I'm not an X-Men guy. I'm just not. I wish I was. And when my friends are working on X-Men, I will read that stuff. And it's like, all right, like Seeley. Seeley was doing one of the tie-in X books of the most recent X event.
Yeah.
And it was good. And I'm like, okay, this is fun. I'm enjoying this. And that's the other interesting thing that I will say, in fairness to Marvel, where they are struggling, I've liked a lot of the tie-in books. Steph Phillips was doing World War She-Hulk, or I forget what it was called, but essentially it was She-Hulk going back to Planet Hulk, and her being the gladiator, and also bringing her lawyer mediating ability to the warring factions. And she's like, Christ, I can't believe I'm, you know, it was like throwing She-Hulk into a Conan sort of warrior, barbarian sort of situation. But she's still a lawyer as much as a strong woman. And like, fuck, I got to deal with these idiots. And it was funny as hell. And I really enjoyed it. And I'm sorry that it ended, you know, when it's ending and everything. But again, sales are dictating what's going on and everything. But yeah, my point is, if I don't like, if I really, you know, because people hit me up all the time, and it's very flattering, and they want to come on the show. But if I'm not into the book, it's like, sorry, man, I'm not going to lie. I can't.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do? But tell me about you briefly mentioned it. You're also doing Beneath the Trees, and the sequel just wrapped up for that. The Right is Spring. So you know, tell me about editing those books.
Yeah. So Beneath the Trees, it was first brought to us by so Patrick Horvath, the writer and artist Beneath the Trees. He does a lot of like movie work. He did a lot of work on like independent horror productions in Hollywood. He's done a lot of like storyboards for different things. And our entertainment guy, Paul Davidson, knew him, and he brought kind of a collection of pitches from Patrick to us. It was like a page that had like 5 pitches on it. And at that time, actually, I was like, oh, wait, I actually had known his work because he had done one comic, and it was one of the, it was part of the Ha Ha anthology that W. Maxwell Prince had written, which was like an anthology series that was all like these clown-based horror stories. And I was like, oh, wait, that guy's awesome. I love that guy. So we looked through these, and Maggie Howell, who was the original editor of Beneath the Trees and really helped shape its direction and deserves all of the, Patrick deserves all the credit, but deserves the next level of credit for Beneath the Trees and how it became what it is. Me and her went through those and were like, oh, the serial killer bear thing is incredible. So we reached out to Patrick and was like, can you tell us more about this? And he instantly sent us like 10 character designs, including this design we've used over and over of Samantha looking very cute and cuddly, but she's like holding a bloody knife in her hand. And Maggie and I are both just like, well, this is the book. This is incredible. This is awesome. Like, it was one of those things that when an idea is that good, you just know from the outset. Like, it's just like from seeing those images, we said it back then. We were like, oh, this is going to be a hit book for us. That's awesome. And you just knew then. And Patrick then sent us the outline that was like very fully formed, kind of from jump. Like, Patrick really knew what he was doing and really knew the story he was telling. And like I said, I was just an assistant on that first book. Maggie Howell was the editor, and she did an incredible job. And then Maggie went to go work at Ignition with Jamie Rich. So then I was left getting to edit the sequel series of Patrick, which is called Rite of Spring. And working with Patrick on this book it's so fun and so exciting. And he really falls into that kind of archetype of like horror creator who is like very, very cuddly and smiley in real life. Like, he's just like the nicest dude. And he's so fun to talk to. And it's really fun to watch him like have this meteoric rise and have this like moment in the industry where it's so funny, because it's like you almost would think that it's impossible what happened, where it's like, why did we have this fully formed cartoonist who had never made a comic before? It's bizarre almost, but he makes a comic in his 40s and you're like, where have you been? You just had this talent. You can just flex on us with this insane painted work, this incredible comic. And he's such a joy, and everyone that meets him is like, he's the nicest, friendliest dude in the world, whether it's a fan at a convention or a retailer he's doing a signing at. And, now he's just exploding across the industry. He's doing some stuff with Archie. He's always, like, he's done some stuff at DC now, and I'm sure he has just huge projects coming up, and we're going to keep doing some more Beneath the Tree stuff with him. But it's so fun. And that's one of those books where, you kind of just stay the hell out of the way. You're a sounding board for this guy, and he'll pitch you these things, and you give little tweaks here and there, but mostly you just shut up. You just don't. The funniest thing about an editor is knowing when you're like, okay, I'm co-building this with people, I'm getting in, I'm helping plot, and when it's like, this person has a singular vision, and my job is just to kind of like pop in and help once in a while of just like, hey, what about this? I don't know, as the creator, you might have missed this, or what about this thing? But like, it's all Patrick, man. He's killing it. So cool. It's been really fun to have a front row seat to someone just having this moment. Like, I think it's really like, as a younger editor, getting to experience that and see what that looks like and watch Patrick handle that moment with such grace has been just a really exciting thing to see.
Would you say Mark Doyle was your mentor as far as learning how to edit, or tell me who were your mentors in terms of getting you where you're at now?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing, like, I'm not blowing smoke, was the podcast. Like, listening to people on these podcasts talking about this work and analyzing it and being critical about it, and creators talking about like how they make the work and what they're doing. And then like, I was listening to your guys' podcast, and I was listening to stuff like Writers Panel and all of this stuff, where they're just really discussing getting the nitty gritty of writing comics and making comics was really exciting, and such a big first part. I think that allowed me to come in kind of having some of these thoughts fully formed already. And then entering the field, it was this awesome combination of Mark Doyle, Maggie Howell, and Jamie Rich, because Jamie came to the company after I'd already been here for like 1.5 or 2 years. And he was our editor-in-chief for like, I think it was about 2 years before he left for Ignition. And those three people just so knowledgeable, so good at their jobs, had so many connections around the industry. And it's funny with an editor, because I think so much of being an editor is just really trusting your own taste, right? Like, that is so much of the job. A lot of the job is like, I don't even do grammar. We have a proofreader. Like, my job is just like, is this cool? Is this working? If not, get on the phone with these people and like talk through it, maybe pitch an idea, but mostly just like talk about what's not working and just like remind them of the foundation, and they'll fill in the gaps themselves, right? So I think the issue you have with comics editors is if they don't really love comics, they don't like this type of comic, and they're trying to edit something they're not a fan of in the first place. And that's when you run into like a confused edit of like, maybe someone would like this. I don't know, where you have to say, no, I like this or I don't like this, right? So like I worked at a comic shop for a couple of years and I read everything on the shelf and like I built up this, my own personal taste. So when I came into comics, I had all that I was dealing with, all this taste that I needed help refining. And I think that Maggie, Mark, and Jamie were key to helping me like refine that taste into being like a legitimate human being who can join a team and be a collaborator like that.
No, that's smart. And it sounds like you understand when you should, get involved and help and when you need to get out of the way. And again, getting out of the way, sadly, I know a lot of stories of really good creators that had been doing a book a certain way. And suddenly there's a new editor who's like, it'd be great. And it's like, no, the machine is fine. You're here to make sure the train runs on time. Yeah. We know what we're doing. We know what we're doing. Just
saying. And I think back all the time too. Well, first of all, on a recent podcast with Tom, and I feel like I'd heard him say this before, when you're talking to Tom Brevoort and Tom talking about his first ongoing series as an editor, he keeps saying that he really screwed that up. And hearing that as an editor is always very like, it's very calming to hear. It's like even Tom and stuff that, he feels responsible for ruining. But oh man, I was following a train of thought that you had laid out. What was the question exactly?
Getting out of the way or helping?
Getting out of the way, yeah. Well, yeah, it's just such an interesting thing being too in the way or out of the way. Oh, this TV show Love, which was a Judd Apatow show starring Paul Rust on Netflix. And in the show, it follows this on-set teacher whose job is to teach the young actors on a set about like schoolwork. He's a school teacher, but he wants to be a writer. And he gets this opportunity to join the writer's room at one point, and he's pitching to them. And it basically amounts to like all these like armchair writer pitches of like, well, basically like we should make a good show. And they're like, hey man, we're all trying to make the best show possible. No one here's trying to make a bad show or not working hard. And you have no idea the constraints that we're working under to make this show that we're making. So it's easy to sit where you're at and say like, where Paul Rust is at and say like, oh, you should do it this way or you should do it this way. And actually being in it is like, oh, right. All of these things happen for a reason. There's constraints coming from the licensors or constraints coming from the fans. Because like sometimes like these people, once you're an editor for a while, you've been burnt before where like you put your whole heart into making a project and really thought readers would show up for it and they didn't. And then you're like, well, dang, what do you guys like? And you start to lose faith in yourself. So like, I think that the last 4 years of me editing has been a huge like ego check where like you come in being like, I know how to fix comics. I really have an understanding of how to fix comics. And then you're like, oh no, this is hard. And everyone's doing really good work. And I'm starting to understand why things happen the way they happen. And, it's nice to have that youthful energy and it's necessary in a lot of ways, but it is also typically misguided. And I think that, there's probably people who worked with me early on who were like, that guy was just, God, his ego. He really thought he was going to change something that didn't need to be changed, But yeah, I think honestly, Maggie and Mark were there to check my ego a lot as well, which was, a great role of a mentor.
Very cool, man. Well, again, based on the stuff I'm reading that you're editing and stuff, you're getting it. And really, way to go. And I think doing Godzilla is not easy. And I love the various directions you guys are going in. We didn't talk about the Turtles collaborating with Godzilla as they are in that book, but I really wanted to focus on the ones that I like, and in particular, Starship Godzilla. I mentioned Van's excellent book, Godzilla Heist, and I'm really intrigued by what's coming with the horror of Godzilla. I think this is going to be great. When does this start?
Yeah, so Horror of Godzilla, the first issue is going to drop in. It might be the weekend of Comic-Con. If not, then it's the first weekend of August. But Horror of Godzilla is coming in late July or early August. And yeah, that is the incredible podcasting duo of Ethan S. Parker and Griffin Sheridan, and then with artist Tristan Jones. It's going to be fantastic. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, man. It is, like I said, dream come true. It's such a treat to come and talk to you, man. With
Scioli and Van, I felt I was Godzilla heavy in February. And that's why, Greg's like, hey, man, Jake really wants to come out. I'm like, all right, but, I did 2 Godzillas. I go, that's a lot. I'm like,
it's a lot of Godzilla.
I promise you. And so I really appreciate you being patient. And to the Word Balloon audience, I'm so sorry that I haven't done more live interviews. I am doing interviews for the book as much as I am for the show. And obviously in most cases, they're going to be for both the show and the book. But I didn't want the chat to get in the way of the million things that I wanted to ask Diana Schutz, the million things I wanted to ask for Brevoort. And then also there are just the occasional creators who are like, if it's okay, can we pre-record? In fact, yesterday I interviewed Dan Slott, and Dan's like, if it's okay, I'd like to just pre-record. Sure, man. So, I mean, I'm all about accommodating the guest. That's what I want. So I'm sorry I haven't done as many live shows, and I appreciate Jake being willing to come on live and then doing tonight's show. So next week's going to be an interesting week because I'm going to be doing not only comic book interviews, but I also Mr. Skin is going to be back because the Skinatomy Awards, given that it's Oscar season. So I love Jim. I think he's a very interesting guy, and it might be a little too salacious for the average listener or viewer. I don't care. I find it fascinating that he created this whole industry of watching movie and television scenes and telling you where the nudity is. Why not? Good for you, man. So I have a blast. And I don't get pervy with him or anything. We acknowledge his lists. So yeah, you're gonna hear who he thinks has the best boobs or his audience or the best butt or whatever. Fine, okay.
But it won't be pervy. John promises no perviness.
No, really. And yeah, no, I hear you, man. No, because honestly, people are like, what are you doing? And I'm like, isn't it interesting the way nudity has changed? And again, I can't help it, man. I'm 61. And I remember when it was, a lot more verboten. And now, my God, it's all over streaming. But ironically, there's less of it in movies. And it was completely the opposite growing up. And, it fascinates me that the streamers are like, yeah, sure. Hey, man, you want to get to know Sydney Sweeney? Yeah, here you go. Okay, wow, Jesus Christ. I'm like, all right, I guess.
Sorry, let me break glass in case John starts talking about nudity in movies.
Exactly. Sorry, Jake. Sorry, I'm subjecting to this. So Mr. Skin's going to be on, but also I really wanted to do, and I'm going to continue to do this when they're available, audio sketch comedy, radio sketch comedy, and album sketch comedy, not stand-up, sketch comedy. I grew up with that stuff, and it really informed how I wanted to do radio. And when I got to work at the sports talk station, I brought the examples of guys like Albert Brooks and Harry Shearer, the Spinal Tap guys, Michael McKean, Rob Reiner himself. They were all in these interesting audio sketch groups in the late 60s and early 70s. The Credibility Gap, the Committee, they made albums, but they were on live radio as well on the West Coast. And there was the Ace Trunking Company on the East Coast. Here in Chicago, we had the Usual Suspects. And they were on my rock station, WXRT, about 5 years before I joined the radio station. And they were these Second City live stage sketch comedians, again, surrounded by audio comedy. So the Usual Suspects would do their own 3-minute bits and do them on the radio. And in fact, there's a great YouTube compilation of their bits as well. Well, I'm going to talk to the husband and wife that were 2/3 of the Usual Suspects. And I'm going to do that conversation next week, along with Carla Speed McNeil and a couple other comic book things as well. So it's going to be an interesting, eclectic week next week. And then the week of C2E2, I haven't quite figured it out yet, but that might be a little hard because, people are traveling. Not only that, as Jake likely knows, Planet Comic-Con in Kansas City going on the same weekend. And I forget what West Coast convention is happening that same weekend, the last weekend in March. But I know there is one. I can't remember. It might be WonderCon. I can't remember.
It might be WonderCon, yeah.
I'm not sure. So we'll see what we get. There might be some reruns in there, but I hope everyone understands why I haven't done as many live shows as I normally do. It depends on the creator. Bendis has been very busy doing a lot of traveling and doing a lot of work. We will eventually get back to the book club, and he's itching to talk about new stuff. So all that and more. And like I said, are already in the can. Dan Slott is coming up sooner than later in the next couple of days. So all that and more here on Word Balloon, and I appreciate Jake being around to listen to all that. And as I was telling Jake, Mercury is in retrograde, so my controls to show a closing little bit is not working. So instead of seeing the woman painting or the woman at the museum pointing at my portrait, or you saw did you like the NASA opening that I did?
I really liked your voice recording of being the astronaut. I really liked that.
Can't help it, man. I'm an Apollo kid. No, are you kidding me? When I saw that, I'm like, I need that for the ID. So that's cool. So instead of ending like that, we're gonna have to end with mine and Jake's faces and us waving goodbye. So thanks a lot for watching.